Okay, and welcome back to the channel again this week, ladies and gentlemen, for what will be plenty of good content. In today's video, we're going to look at this is kind of a strange situation, which is why we're going to look at it today, because it involves JPMorgan, largest bank in the world. In fact, it's almost twice the size of the next largest bank, which is Bank of America. And that's by its overall size, not by the total assets. Total assets, there's sort of 3 or 4 banks in China which are bigger, but it is the largest bank in the world. JP Morgan is the sort of person who everybody looks up to for finance in the financial world. He goes to all the big meetings. He's called upon by presidents and WEF meetings and all this sort of stuff. So when he puts out reports or he says anything, people tend to listen. Now, we're going to talk about his annual shareholder letter and what he said in that today and have a look at that. But where everyone's focusing on that, I want to just kind of bring the attention to 2 other things at the same time here. And that's that, yes, I'm listening to what he said in his shareholder letter, and we're going to go through that because I think it's got some valid points. But the other thing that I want to focus on is the fact that he's actually announced that he's looking for a successor. So someone is coming in to replace him, and of the 4 candidates, 3 of them are ladies this time around. So he's sort of expressed that he wants the best person for the job. And I was looking into some of these people, and it's interesting, a couple of these potential candidates. We'll look at those. But the other aspect was not just his successor that's coming in, is the fact that he's selling huge amounts of shares, and not just he's selling loads of shares, but so are the other people at JP Morgan. Now, of course, they insist that everything's really strong and they're just selling due to tax reasons and stuff like that. But and maybe that's true. Maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not. But I do think it's interesting that all these things are coming at the same time. And by the way, we survived the solar eclipse. What a crazy one that was last week. It was, there was even a lot of stuff that I didn't even talk about on last week's video with the solar eclipse. I don't want to ruin today's video by going into it all, but NASA firing 3 rockets at the solar eclipse to measure it. CERN, the large collider, they just decide to turn off their collider, even though it takes years to get all the data and everything, and then restart it yesterday for the solar eclipse. And you watch all the streams, and the scientists are being asked these questions, and they're like, oh, we keep getting asked this same question. And they say, oh, we just decided, there's no conspiracy or there's no coincidence here. We just decided to. And it's like the lady's going, they're asking why though, because it takes years to get all the data. Why? And then the guy goes, just tell them, I don't know, just tell them, oh, you're live. What, I'm live? It's like all this weird stuff. You saw the animals. I don't know if you saw the videos of all the birds just mass dying. There was all these birds that died. There was 20,000 crows in one flock that did all this weird stuff. There was all the sharks that were all swimming around in circles, thousands of them. There was a lot of weird stuff that happened yesterday. But let's not take the focus off today's video. Let's have a look at this then. So this is Jamie Dimon. This is the shareholder letter. I'm going to summarize a lot of this letter. But he's basically warning that the world's facing risks that eclipse anything since World War II. And just summarize a lot of what he said then. He's talking about, as these events unfold, America's global leadership role is being challenged outside by other nations and inside by our polarized electorate. So the outside then is China. He's talking about China, but he's also talking about the BRICS nations, the formation of the BRICS nations. And inside, he's talking about Republicans and Democrats, who are getting even more polarized by the day. Now, there's some interesting stuff he said which I didn't quite agree with. So he says the US economy continues to be resilient, with consumers still spending. Well, yes, they are spending, but they're also, the debt levels, if you look at the charts, the debt levels show that consumers now have the most debt they've ever had in history. So there's always a cap to the spending, especially when the debt caps out, because you can only borrow so much money. It is important to note that the economy is being fueled by large amounts of government deficit spending and past stimulus. Again, correct, but deficit spending can't continue. There is also a growing need for increased spending as we continue transitioning to a greener economy, restructuring global supply chains. This is a worrying one, the restructure, because that is inflationary by nature. Boosting military expenditure, this is a big one as we're seeing the world become more militarized, and then battling these rising healthcare costs. I was watching a short video the other day, and I was amazed. I might even have to do a video of my own on this, at the cost that Americans are now having to pay for healthcare. And I didn't really put two and two together, but it reminded me of these Americans that I met in Thailand this year. And they were a lot older actually. And I said, oh, what are you doing here? And they were saying, well, we don't have health insurance and it's so expensive. So we fly here to have procedures or whatever it is they're having. And then they stay for a couple of weeks, have a vacation, and then they fly back to America and they say, we still save thousands of dollars. And I was like, I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of Americans who don't either pay or don't have health insurance flying halfway across the world to have their health care, and then they fly home. So it's quite interesting. I might have to look into that more. This may lead to stickier inflation and higher rates than markets expect. Furthermore, there are downside risks to watch, he says. So quantitative tightening, what we call QT, is draining more than 900 billion in liquidity annually. I don't agree with this statement. It has done it for 1 year, but I think they're going to taper this off probably in the next few months. I would say in the next 3 to 4 months, they're going to stop QT. So you won't see this drain. Not that it's made a big difference anyway. The markets have still boomed. And we've never truly experienced the full effect of tightening on this scale. Plus the ongoing wars in Ukraine. You know what? You look at different ways that, like the Times and other people. So what he said was ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Now you look at the media, and they completely spun this statement completely different. One of them says, and I strongly condone Putin and his ravenage, this like all this stuff. And if I ever was to meet him and all this, and I'm like, what? Where was this statement? I did not see that anywhere. I'm reading the reports. They twist all the words. So this is why I'm looking at this extract here, so I can get the accurate things of what he said. And the Middle East, again, he didn't say what they reported on about the Middle East. He just said there's conflict in the Middle East. And he said this is going to disrupt energy and food markets. And a big one to watch out for is if Israel, Iran have a major conflict, you are going to see oil absolutely go through the roof. And I mean, the oil price, I wouldn't even want to guess. 125, 130, 135 a barrel, that will cripple the entire global economy. And no one seems to be even looking at this. Iran and Israel, if they were to go to war, if they had major conflict, you are talking about a global, just a global recession at the minimum, because of what would happen with the oil price here. And then he's talking about migration. Again, very controversial points, but he's allowed to talk about them. Migration, military and economic relationships, and the human cost of all of these things. So he hasn't said anything that's crazy here. All of the following factors appear to be inflationary. Ongoing fiscal spending is true. The remilitarization of the world, definitely. You look at the impact of World War II and what happened to different currencies that were so weak by the end of that war, because military and war costs a fortune. Restructuring of global trade, we'll see how that goes, but I agree it's inflationary. And capital needs of the new green economy. We've talked about this a lot. I don't necessarily agree with all the things around the green economy, and possibly higher energy costs in the future. Now, this is quite interesting because he talks about due to a lack of needed investment in the energy infrastructure. Now, no one else will say that, but he'll say it, that there just isn't enough investment because And remember that JPMorgan was also part of this. He actually said on that interview, my hands are tied. I don't agree with the things that I'm being told I have to do, right? The policies that are coming down that restricts his banking or his bank, or well, not his bank, but he's the CEO of the bank, but he's restricted onto what he can do because these policies are coming down around they're not allowed to invest into companies that do oil and gas and things like that. And he's actually talked about this, and I was amazed that they actually put this out. It was at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos where he disagreed with that board, which I thought was very unusual. I've never been a big fan of Jamie Dimon, but I did respect him for saying that, because it is true that if you collapse all the energy and just ramp up all the renewables, well, you're going to have a problem. You've got to, if you're going to transition to a green economy, you've got to have all the fossil, even though they're not fossil, fuels to back it. What else did he say then? Okay, this was an interesting one. So he was talking about inflation of the 70s and 80s and the Vietnam War. Inflation went over 10%. The deficits today are even larger and occurring in boom times. This is where we are right now, boom times, not as the result of a recession. And they've been supported by this QE, quantitative easing, which was never done before the great financial crisis. This was of 2008. Equity values, this is a key one, by most measures are at the high end of the valuation range. Now, this is key for those of you who have equities, because it doesn't mean to say that equities are going to collapse. They're just at the high valuation range. And credit spreads are extremely tight. Markets seem to be pricing in a 70 to 80% chance of a soft landing. Now, I'm not convinced of this 70 to 80% of a soft landing. I don't think we're going to be there. And this is another thing. What they're factoring in and preparing for is interest rates, so broad range, of 8% or more. You can see this is in his report. 8%. Can you imagine if the US or any developed economy had an 8% interest rate? That would be very interesting indeed. And he's talking about stagflation. Excuse me, stagflation. Remember that a 2% point increase in rates will reduce the value of most financial assets by 20%. And we already have the issue with the real estate anyway, especially the commercial real estate. When terrible events happen, we tend to overestimate the effect they will have on the global economy. Recent events, however, may very well be creating risks that could eclipse anything since World War II. We should not take them lightly. And you can read this full report, the shareholder letter, here. It's on reports.jpmorgan Chase. Now, the FT goes into detail as well. I'm not going to read that because they've changed a lot of the words, and they've changed a lot of the things that he said. Again, they're using all sorts of different language and adding stuff in. So we're not going to go through that today, because whenever they add stuff in, I try not to talk about that on the channel. Now, here's another point then. So this is from Business Insider. He's actually sold off $150 million of shares. And this is the first time in how long has he been in post? 16 to 18 years? And this is the first time he sold off shares. But it's not just him. Oh, okay, 18 years actually. It's not just him that's done this. There's a lot of others. Here we go. Other insiders then. The co-CEO of the Commercial and Investment Bank, he sold 13.7 million worth of shares. The bank's general counsel offloaded 1.1 million. The chief information officer sold 716,000. Now, all of this, I'm not saying that there's a problem there. I'm just saying it's interesting that they've all sold shares at the exact same time. Why? Maybe it's just a coincidence. People sell stock all the time, especially if they've got large holdings. Sometimes you want to diversify. Sometimes you just want to, use it for tax benefits and other things. You might want to give your children some money, things like that. But it is we're talking a lot of money here, $150 million. It is quite unusual when you look at this. So he's talking about his predecessors then, and I was looking at some of these predecessors as to who they are. So we've got 4 main people here, and to be honest, most of them they all seem fine. Good write-ups on a lot of these ladies, because they're 3 out of the 4 are ladies. Good write-ups on them. I couldn't really find anything untowards. Only this lady here. I mean, look at that photo. There was only this lady that I found who there was a lot of WEF and a lot of these meetings and stuff like that. And she's on the board, and she's not actually in place to as a main runner. She's sort of in 4th place. But I wouldn't be surprised at all, even though she's in 4th place, if she was to take over with the connections. Remember, it's all about the connection. Now, I wanted to move on to a couple of other points here. We've just seen the 99-cent stores in the USA gone into liquidation, and they don't really talk about the reason why, because all of these companies are very political now, so they don't want to say. But they did say, I pulled this out of rising levels of shrink. Now, shrinkage can mean one of 2 things in retail. Shrinkage is either theft, so it means that it's just shrunk, like your inventory shrunk. You don't know why, it's theft. The other reason is you can have, I mean, there's so many reasons. There can be damages. You put some stock out, it gets damaged, something else happens to it, whatever, right? That's one reason. But what they're not really saying here is that there was a massive increase over the last few years of shrinkage. That is theft. That's why else would there be just this massive spike? And I should have pulled the chart up, actually. The chart's huge. There's just this massive spike. That's not from people being more careless. You're still getting the same people going into the stores. I don't think people have just become more careless and they're just breaking inventory and stuff like that. I think it's probably to do with crime. They just don't want to say it. So we've got shrinkage. All 371 stores are going to be closing. Now you think how many jobs that is? 371 stores. That's a lot. Fiscal data then from the Treasury. How much has the US government spent this year? Almost $7 trillion has been. This is up 9% as well. So all this talk. I was watching Biden's speaking about how he's bringing the debt down. How he's doing. I was watching this going, people honestly can't believe this. Surely they really, really can't believe what he's saying here. Oh, I brought down inflation. I brought down this. I brought down, the debt level. It's like any human being just looks at the chart and says, the debt's up. It's up 9%. But he keeps saying this, and then you hear the press secretary saying, oh, we brought the debt down. We're bringing this down, bringing deficits down. The trade is amazing. It's getting stronger. Oh, everything's great. And I'm going, the data doesn't say that. The data says the opposite. In fact, last thing I wanted to talk about, there's all this propaganda coming out now, and AP put this out, why they would put this out, I don't know. Who wouldn't like prices to start falling? Careful what you wish for. Economists say. No economist said that, first and foremost. And then they use ridiculous examples like Pepsi. Oh, a 35% increase due to inflation. No, Pepsi, and all of you who have taken my stock market course will understand this when I talked about the chapter on the moat. So do you remember the moat? Well, I talked about a company with a moat can just do whatever it wants with prices because people will still pay for those prices because it exists as a brand in their brain, and they have addictions to a lot of products like Pepsi and Coke and stuff like that. So these companies have a moat, so they can just put prices up. It's nothing to do with some of the stuff they were talking about. And the way they wrote this as well was so ridiculous. I just couldn't believe it. Most Americans are not just looking for disinflation. Lisa Cook, a member of the Federal Reserve Boards of Governors, said last year, they're looking for deflation. They want these prices to be back where they were before the pandemic. Okay, so first point on that, the prices aren't going to go back. I'm really sorry to tell you all this, but the prices will not go back to where they were. And the reason why is because they can't go back. the spread of money that exists now, or currency, is too great for those products and services to go back down. They've gone up and they're not gonna come back down. You may see some very minor deflation, but it would be, if it happened, it'd be very, very minor. And all of these articles is propaganda saying, oh, I know you all want prices to come back down, but it's bad for you. It's really bad for you. And I need to tell you why it's so bad for you. Look at these economists. This is a Nobel Prize winning economist. And he says blah, 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 blah. And this is all these stories are. There's 6 or 7 of them that all came out at the same time, which you then know they've been paid for stories. Where was it? Many economists caution, though, that consumers should be careful what they wish for. Falling prices across the economy would actually be an unhealthy sign. Well, not really. The sign of a healthy economy is not to have a zombie economy where you've got a central bank and a government that are just printing and creating money out of thin air, weakening the value of your money and your savings. So a strong economy, a real economy, prices should fall, and they should fall every year because of the free market, because of technological advancements and advancements in materials and supply chains and manufacturing. Prices should actually fall. So they don't want you to know this. They try and tell you that prices should go up and it's good for you. No, it's not. The Bank of England warns more consequences from falling prices that meets the eye. And then they had to go to the Bank of Spain and find this little bit on a website just to emphasize this. Deflation can in fact be highly damaging to the economy. Nonsense. And then they use employment scarring in the completely wrong way, because falling prices tend to discourage consumers from spending, and this leads to people losing their jobs. Not really, that's employment scarring. They're mixing these things up. And then they said a healthy economy depends on steady consumer purchasing, and they use the United States. The 70% of the economy is from consumer spending. That is not a healthy economy. That is a really unhealthy economy. Okay, so they go through all this anyway. You can read this article if you're interested. And then they use the Bank of International Settlements as this, the podium, as if to say, look at these guys, these are amazing. These were the guys, you remember that video I showed you where the man, he was one of the heaviest guys I've ever seen in my life, came on and he said, the central bank digital currency is important and we need it because right now we don't know who's spending money on what, and we can't control that. So we need to be able to program this CBDC. It can't come soon enough so that we can start to make restrictions and find out who's spending and then stop that spending. Is this not crazy to you, this dystopian nature of some of the things these people say? And then again, they go through all. We won't even cover the rest of this because it's so ridiculous, this article and everything that they've been doing. So just remember that a lot of this is just propaganda that they're putting out. Oh, falling prices is bad for you. You want prices going up. Oh, you need higher wages. That's bad for you as well, because if you ask for a pay rise, we have to put up prices, and then we have to cut profits from shareholders. And if shareholders pull out, the stock price will fall and the company could collapse and you'll lose your job. 100,000 of you could lose your job. Do you really want that for your families? It's like, they will try any trick in the book, these guys. All right, well, I'll see you tomorrow. I've got a video coming out, a new style of video, hopefully this weekend. I would love your feedback on it. I'm going to do it as a premiere on the channel. It's taken a lot of work on 15-minute cities, a lot of production value. So that should come out this weekend. I will let you know if it's going to be ready in time. I'm still working on it, but I'd love your feedback on that and if you want me to do more bigger production videos. So that's it for today. Take care. God bless you and your families, and I'll see you tomorrow.